In the end, it was really the only place the polar bear should have gone.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on the Instagrams. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. About once every 48 years, I go on something called Blue Sky at Sully Baseball. But the best way to communicate with me is to go on to YouTube and put something in the comments section. That's where I will be. All right, folks. It is a day where something happened, and those days are getting few and far between. But do you know what? There is a certain amount of musical chairs being played. The music is starting to slow down a little bit, and pitchers and catchers are reporting in about a week and a half. So if you're an unsigned player, you have to sign. You better sign. And Pete Alonso today returned to the New York Mets in a deal that is smart for the Mets. They brought back Pete Alonso. They could really use Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is not just a fan favorite on the Mets. I'm not a big believer all the time in making decisions about your team based upon nostalgia, but he is still a productive player who could help the Mets. Certainly is good morale on the Mets to have him around. And the Mets are obviously going for it. Maybe you hadn't learned, but they're signing a bunch of players, and the team that went on a rampage in the second half of the season, won 89 games, got to within 2 wins of the World Series, and brought in Juan Soto. Well, now you have Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. You have your two MVPs in there. You got Mark Vientos, who can hit a bunch of home runs, and Pete Alonso can hit a bunch of home runs, and boom, he's still around. He is still around on a team that has images of winning their first World Series title since 1986 dancing in their head. They have the money to do it, they have the will to do it. And Pete Alonso coming back to this team just makes sense. It just does. He gave the Mets one of the greatest thrills they've ever had and one of the most dramatic non-World Series home runs of all time, with the ninth inning home run off of Devin Williams that basically salvaged their season. They were about to lose in the wild card series to Milwaukee. Now, who knows what would have happened if the Brewers went on to face the Philadelphia Phillies? I think the Phillies would have sandbagged them, but I thought the Phillies were going to sandbag the Mets. And it was the Mets who wound up winning a couple of dramatic games, including that couple of come from behind victories. A stunning game one win, and then giving the Dodgers a run for their money. Yes, when the Mets lost, they got their butts handed to them by Los Angeles. And I was there for the final game of the NLCS, which was, well, I mean, the Mets actually, I don't know if you remember this, the Mets actually had a lead in game 6 of the NLCS. And then the Dodgers wound up doubling them up 10-5. In that game, Pete Alonso got on base 3 times and drove in a run. This is a smart move. This is a good move for the Mets. This is a good move for the Mets because he fits in with the team, and it's not a super long-term deal. It's just a couple of years. And with that, they know they're going to have power for a couple of years. And if they wind up winning the World Series this year, and I don't know if I'm picking the Mets. I don't know if I'm picking the Mets to even win the division. The Braves are a damn good team. Philadelphia is a damn good team, but so are the Mets. And the Mets are certainly in the short list of teams in the National League that have a legit shot to win the pennant. And having the power source like Pete Alonso, you know what? Not so bad. It's a great situation for Pete Alonso as well. You have Pete Alonso coming in. You know he doesn't have to carry the team. He doesn't even have to be the second superstar of the team. And he gets to have the fans cheer him. He gets to come back to a place where he has tons of goodwill in the bank. Pete Alonso is a very good player who's had a very nice career. If he hits, 31, 32 more home runs, he'll be the all-time home run leader in Mets history. He's had a couple of very good seasons and some other seasons where he's hit a lot of home runs and his other stats aren't great. But he has earned a lot of goodwill, especially after that home run off of Devin Williams. That is a power player. And he's really, he's 30. He's not old. He's not the spring chicken he was when he hit the 53 home runs when he was 24 years old, but it's not like he's an ancient player. And he signed a deal and he gets to be part of this team. And he, with the goodwill in the bank that he has, I think he has more value with the Mets than he does with any other team. Where else was he going to sign? What other team was going to pony up big money for him? Toronto? Did he really want to go to that situation in Toronto? That truly dysfunctional franchise. The Angels? He would go to the Angels? That absolute disastrous franchise that could turn any great career into garbage, which is, I mean, that's been their legacy. So no, I mean, he was going to go rot in Anaheim or sit in Siberia of Toronto. I know Toronto's a great, wonderful city, but the Blue Jays are going nowhere in a hurry. And the Mets, the next couple of years, the Mets have a legitimate shot to win the World Series, and Pete Alonso is going to be there. Now, I know there is a certain amount of schadenfreude. Now, Scott Boras got the big, huge honking deal for Juan Soto. And people will point out that at one point, Pete Alonso was given a 7-year, $158 million extension. He was offered that not this summer, but the previous summer in June. This was according to John Sherman of the New York Post. He declined a 7-year extension in 2023. And instead, he signed a 2-year deal that will pay him a lot less. And I'm sure for a lot of people who only think about things in terms of the uh, owners, they'll be snickering at Scott Boras and saying, "Oh, his rejecting of that contract wound up costing him $100 million." Yeah, that's true. I never understand. I don't understand the hate for Scott Boras. That's not hyperbole. I don't. If he was a podcaster agent, I would hope the hell he was my agent. And whatever you do for a living, you would want to have Scott Boras working for you too. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, he turned down that deal because he took one look around. He saw what the Matt Olsons of the world were getting and some other first basemen and Freddie Freeman were getting, and he thought he was going to get that. Well, do you know what? Pete Alonso's not Freddie Freeman. Pete Alonso's not Matt Olson. Pete Alonso's more of a pure slugger, and those other two are better all-around hitters. And so, in terms of market value and everything, Pete probably got the right deal. And think about this as an episode of Deal or No Deal. He picked the suitcase that had 2 years, 50 some odd million dollars. And he could have picked the suitcase with $150 million, but he didn't. He still picked a pretty good suitcase. Yeah, I know it's $100 million less, and sometimes you may kick yourself, but at the same time, he's going to cash out and he's going to have a lot of money. He's doing really well for himself. And I have to be fair about this. I say that I don't always side on the I very rarely side with the owners on anything because I don't trust them any further than I can throw them. But this seems like a good market deal. Pete Alonso went out to the open market, saw what was out there, saw he wasn't going to get a 10-year deal. Does he probably wish he signed that? Maybe. Took a shot. And in the end, he has to live with the consequences of being beloved by a fan base and being a multimillionaire. So I think that he got what the market would say. If there was a team out there that was willing to spend that type of money, they would have. If I were running a team, and I'm not, I want to stop that rumor, he probably wouldn't offer Pete Alonso more than a couple of years. But at least he didn't get like a 1-year deal. At least he didn't get stiffed or going into spring training. He's going to go into spring training saying, fine, I'm going to be a Met for the next couple of years and see where that takes me. And if you're a Met fan, this is the only thing I want to hear from Met fans. When Pete Alonso steps on that field, I want to hear cheers. I want a standing ovation. He gave Met fans one of the greatest thrills in the history of their franchise last year. And he has thrown down for this team. He plays, he hits home run after home run, and he plays every day. He played 162 games last year, 154 the year before that, 160 the year before that, 152 the year before that. He played 57 games in the COVID year and 161 games in the first year when he hit those 53 home runs. He has given this franchise everything. He shows up to play, and he apparently loves being a Met, and the Mets love having him. And all things considered, when you look up and you say, hey, your booby prize is going back to New York, where they could be on the verge of a spectacular postseason, and you get to have enough money to live the rest of your life, do you know what? That's not a bad consolation prize. The big game is almost here. You know the big game I'm talking about. And there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in the action. Here's how it works. You can pick more or less than on at least 2 player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. I think he's going to do that. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. You can check out the promos tab to nail any of the super sweet Millie winners' big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Hey, South Philly says, who is this clown? It's Chappelle Sully. Not 100% sure what your issue is on this particular. Maybe it's because he didn't sign with the Philadelphia Phillies. Did you want him? The Phillies going to be okay. I think the Phillies have an excellent chance of winning the National League pennant this year. I think they're an elite team, and you know what? I'm all for it. But thanks for listening, South Philly. If you're wondering who the clown is, you can follow me at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. One Met is back and one Met is gone. You have Harrison Bader is signing with the Minnesota Twins. I think that's a solid move for the Minnesota Twins. Remember, I mean, this is the thing I said the other day about the Tigers signing Jack Flaherty. With the Tigers signing Jack Flaherty, the idea is to just put major leaguers on the roster, especially if you're a central team. If you're a central team, grab as many as you can. And he's now a millionaire. And Harrison Bader, when Harrison Bader is healthy, he is a solid center fielder. He's a Gold Glove winner. Not that that really amounts to anything, South Philly. But, he's got some pop. He has appeared in the postseason with a few teams, and he's played well in the postseason. And you know what? For a team like the Minnesota Twins, who narrowly missed the postseason last year, they're playing in the Central. And I've made this point over and over again. If South Philly is new to this because he keeps asking who is this clown, then I've made this point. If you're a Central team, grab as many major leaguers as possible. Grab them because what 88 wins will win that division, and filling your holes, having as few holes as possible seems to be the issue. Then you'll be putting a team on the field that at least will have major leaguers. And maybe some of those major leaguers, you can catch lightning in a bottle, or at least you have some holes that are filled that you're not putting in there with inexperienced players. Now, I do think Philadelphia has, I wasn't going to talk about this originally, but if we have some South Philly here, we'll bring it on. I'm enthusiastic about the Phillies. Yeah, could they have had a more productive postseason or offseason? Sure. But I thought this was the strongest team going into the postseason last year. And a bounce here or a bounce there against the Mets, they would have gone far. I honestly believe that. I think they would have beaten Los Angeles. Absolutely, I think they would have beaten Los Angeles because they had the stronger starting rotation. And the Dodgers, as I said, I mean, people say like they're buying too many players. Uh, I think, I don't know if you realize that, but at one point I got a call saying, "Can you throw 2 innings?" Sandy Koufax threw out the first pitch in one of the World Series games, and Dave Roberts said, "Can you suit up? Just be an opener. Just be an opener." I think the bullpen for Philadelphia is going to be solid. I think Bryce Harper has a chip on his shoulder, and one of the most underrated things in baseball is a superstar who's angry. Bryce Harper signed a contract with the Philadelphia Phillies on the eve of the Nationals winning the World Series. He is signed with Philadelphia until the heat death of the universe. And he wants to be the one to deliver only the third title in the history of the Philadelphia Phillies. You saw that when he put that team on his back in 2022, a team that had no business getting past Atlanta in 2022. And they took an Astros team to 6 games. And if you saw what he did, saying, "This is going to be my team," I believe if there's a team that people are sleeping on, I do think it's Philadelphia. I think Atlanta, as I said before, Atlanta is a very good team that had a bunch of injuries, and I like what they've done. I do like the fact that they have put in a lot of good, talented players. They've been sneaky. Los Angeles, obviously, big skyrockets in flight. The Mets, big, huge moves. The Padres are in a little bit of dynasty. They're going to be in a not the dynasty that the Dodgers are trying to build, but they're going to have the soap opera that could tear the team down. Now, my new friend South Philly says the Mets have no pitching. I think that's an exaggeration, but I think Philadelphia has stronger pitching. Arizona has that's the team to don't sleep on. Arizona's pitching, especially with the addition of Corbin Burns, I mean, their pitching could be the best in the National League. If you have Zach Gallen, if you have Brandon Pfaadt, you have, you cross your fingers that you make it something like Jordan Montgomery. Merrill Kelly is still hanging around, and you put Corbin Burns in that rotation. The teams that won the pennant in 2022 and 2023, people are sleeping on the Phillies and the Diamondbacks. But as I said, patch your holes with major leaguers and take your chances because the Mets, look, they don't have the depth in the pitching staff that Philadelphia and Arizona have, but then again, neither did Los Angeles last year. So things can work out, things can happen, and we shall see. I just can't wait for the season to get started because, quite frankly, uh, the National League is going to be about 4 or 5 excellent teams getting at it, and the American League is going to be as I said before, the American League is going to be every team not called the Chicago White Sox thinking they have an actual chance of it. When we come back, I'm going to pay tribute to a Hall of Famer whose article I read back in 1987 and put a tear in my eye and is, quite frankly, a really, really great reminder of what we have to be celebrating when we talk about Negro League stars. Attending playoff games is an unforgettable experience that just brings fans together. I had a great experience this year going to game 6 of the National League Championship Series in Los Angeles. The excitement, the energy was absolutely palpable. And you know what? I'm looking forward to going to more playoff games this year, assuming the Dodgers get in. It's a good assumption. Game Time is what I use, and they got a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. Filters out the fluff and shows you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. When I use Game Time to get my NLCS tickets, the deals were simple. I found a great value of all kinds of seats. I'm now using the super deal. It's impressive. They offer the best value in the event, and they got the seat views. I'm going to be using that when I go to Sacramento to see the A's in their new stadium, and I want to have the best view where I go there. And they got the on-time ticket delivery and the lowest price guarantee that gives me peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices. Do you know what they are? They're guaranteed. I talk a lot about the Negro Leagues on this show, as I always have the Turkey Stern Centennial over my shoulder as Vanessa Ivy Rhodes. Vanessa Ivy Rose, the granddaughter and award nominated podcaster, the granddaughter of Turkey Stearns, is a frequent guest on the show. I remember when I was a teenager in New England, I read a Sports Illustrated article from 1987. I was still living in Massachusetts in 1987. There was a article from an issue which was called "A Day in Baseball," and they were that articles from stories from all around baseball during that day. And there was a article written by Nicholas Davidoff called "Big Tall from the Hall," and it followed the article followed Ray Dandridge. And I remember when I was younger, like in the 80s, I knew that the Negro Leagues existed, and I had read a book called Only the Ball Was White, which was the first real history of the Negro Leagues. But I really didn't think about it, understand it that much. And I knew like Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson and Cool Papa Bell, and I knew that Jackie Robinson and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and Ernie Banks had all played in the Negro Leagues. But I really didn't think about it other than kind of a social issue thing. I never thought about it in terms of the baseball issue of it, which is beyond the social justice of players not being allowed to play in the major leagues. There was the baseball fan element of, I want to see the best players playing in the major leagues. And how many great players were denied entrance over all those years, not just because it was right or wrong morally, but I want to see the best players play. We just had the memorial for Ricky Henderson in Oakland. Imagine a baseball history where he was not allowed to play in the major leagues. Imagine that. And his teammate Dave Stewart, was one of the ones who was eulogizing him. What would the playoffs in the 80s be like if he was not allowed to play? Or players, players from the dark-skinned players from the Dominican not being allowed to play. The whole element of who the best players were, that is one of the great injustices of segregation. But back to that article. I remember when I read that article, it was following Ray Dandridge, who was living in Palm Bay, California, which is part of the Space Coast, which is the east coast of Florida, part of the state that I know very, very well, Melbourne and all that whole area. He was living there. He was retired. He had played many years for predominantly with the Newark Eagles, but then he also played many, many years in Mexico. And the article followed his wife getting a phone call and that he was inducted to the Hall of Fame in 1987. And he like he burst into tears because he couldn't believe what was happened. And I started, I read that at age 14, 15 years old, and I was incredibly moved and read about him. And his career is one of those great frustrating careers because everyone who saw him play thought he was the greatest defensive and offensive third baseman of his time. He would have been the Brooks Robinson. He would have been the Mike Schmidt of his day. And there are not a lot of great third basemen. When you think about it, how many great third basemen are in the Hall of Fame? Of all the positions, it's probably the least populated one. And how many teams could have used a slick fielding, home run hitting third baseman whose baseball IQ was evidently through the roof? He had played many, many years in, as I said, predominantly with the Newark Eagles, but also he took a detour in his career that a lot of players in the Negro Leagues did, which was he went to Mexico. A lot of black players went to Mexico because those leagues paid well. You didn't make a lot of money in the Negro Leagues. You didn't make a lot of money in the major leagues then either. And there were many wealthy people in Mexico who were paying top dollar and didn't give a damn what color your skin was. They just wanted the best players there. So the likes of Cool Papa Bell and Satchel Paige and Ray Dandridge, they all went down to Mexico to make some solid money. And they played alongside Mexicans. They also went play alongside a lot of white Americans who were let go and said, well, let's make some money. We saw a lot of that in the 1980s when American players who were kind of at the end of their career wound up going to Japan to pick up some money. And Dandridge excelled while playing in the Negro Leagues to the point that when he was there, he was offered a chance by Bill Veeck, who at the time ran the Cleveland Indians, if that's what they were called then. Uh, Bill Veeck was trying to integrate Cleveland's team around the same time that the Dodgers and Branch Rickey were trying to integrate the Dodgers. And Rickey beat him to the punch. But he was offered a chance to sign with Cleveland, but Ray Dandridge turned it down because he was making too much money in Mexico. Now, eventually, he wound up signing with the New York Giants. I almost said the San Francisco Giants, the New York Giants, and he went on to be a mentor to some of their young black players in their farm system. That included future Hall of Famer Monty Irvin and a fellow named Willie Mays. And when they were a pennant contender in the mid 1950s, they could have used some help at third base, but there was kind of a agreement, kind of an understanding at the time, which was you can't have too many. We'll have integration, but not too many on the team. And he never got to play. He never got to play in the major leagues. He was leading the league in hitting. He was batting 360 in AAA. Okay, but he led all of the minor leagues in batting, while the Giants had a bunch of third basemen in a revolving door, and Willie Mays and Monty Irvin go like, "Hey, do you want to maybe bring up the best hitter in the minor leagues to come up and help our team?" And he did not. He wound up being in the several organizations as a scout and an instructor, and eventually retired and got elected to the Hall of Fame. But I just want to bring his name up because you may not know his name. You may not know who he is. And some of the players who played at his time, you probably do know. Players who were playing in the 40s and 50s. You probably heard of, Ralph Kiner. You probably heard of Willie Mays. You probably heard of Ted Williams. You probably heard of Bobby Doerr. You probably heard of Mickey Mantle. You probably heard of some of the players who would have been his contemporaries. And unless you're a baseball historian, you probably don't know about Ray Dandridge. When I was at the Baseball Hall of Fame last summer, I remember seeing his plaque and several of the other plaques from the Negro Leaguers and wondering not just what could have been in terms of social justice. So hot button words to use. But would he have helped the Giants win a couple more World Series? Just like could Turkey Stearns have helped the Tigers win a couple World Series? What team would cool Papa Bell have been a beloved Philly, a beloved Cardinal? And how many more titles would they have won then? It's the great frustration just out of we missed out on good baseball. And the one great thing about his life and his career and the recognition, though late, it wasn't posthumous. And that's what made me happy. He got inducted in 87. Many of the people who played in the Negro Leagues who got inducted to the Hall of Fame, they were posthumous, but not Ray Dandridge. When you take a look at like his teammate Willie Wells, who played for many teams, was also a great manager, set all sorts of records, never got to play in the major leagues, and he died in 1989. Was inducted to the Hall of Fame in 1997. Dandridge got to appreciate it. And in that article, if you ever find that article from 1987, Big Call from the Hall, Sports Illustrated, originally published on July 6, 1987, if you read that, read it, and have some Kleenex nearby because you may have to wipe a tear or two from the eyes. Well, I don't have to wipe a tear or two from my eyes because something positive happened today. And I've made a brand new friend in Mr. South Philly. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And but just leave your messages right here on the YouTubes. Talking about the polar bear returning, Phillies fans should be a little confident. Harrison Bader finding the right place and saluting Ray Dandridge. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.